A reminder you can help support the channel by joining the AMTV Patreon. You can also follow us and keep up to date on Twitter at AdamMartinAMTV, or if you like, you can join us here at AMTV by becoming a staff member via the YouTube membership program. It's the end for CBBC! Except it isn't. Or it is. Well, it isn't. Right, okay. Let's break it down. So this comes from the big boss, in case you haven't heard, Director General Tim Davies. He basically outlined the BBC's digital first push, and that means that channels like CBBC and also things like BBC4 are going to be shut down in the linear sense. They're not shutting down completely, but they will not be on linear television after a couple of years. So when I saw this, naturally, I must admit, I did read it thinking they were fully shutting down CBBC, which isn't happening at all. And I think the CBBC Twitter account even posted that. They're like, hey guys, calm it, we're not fully dying out here, we're just being moved to digital first. So, but you know, I got swept up in that as well, so that's also my bad. But basically what's happening, Mr. Davies is trying to move things more digitally. You know, all this talk about the future, people aren't watching linear TV anymore, all that sort of stuff. So let's see what he has to say, shall we? He says the first phase of this digital-led shift, if you like, represents 500 million of annual savings and reinvestment to make the BBC digital-led. As part of this, 200 million will contribute to the 285 million annual funding gap by 2027-28, created by the licence fee settlement earlier this year. That's right, earlier this year it was outlined that after 2027, when the Royal Charter expires, the licence fee is most likely going to be scrapped. At least that's the inclination that's been given by members of the government. It says overall there will be up to 1,000 fewer people employed in the public funded part of the BBC over the next 2 years. That is a shame, because the public funded part of the BBC often gets a lot of people their first start in terms of working in television. I've got a few friends who have gotten into the television industry or have moved successfully from job to job because the public funded part of the BBC gave them that opportunity. Mr. Davies says the fight is intensifying, the stakes are high. Oh, sure-y. So, basically, this is what the meat of everything was that everyone was getting in a hoo-ha about. Plans to stop broadcasting smaller linear channels such as CBBC and BBC4 and Radio 4 Extra after the next few years. That is the key point. This isn't happening now. I think they said it will be at least 3 years, so maybe 2025. It might even happen closer towards the end of the charter expiring in 2027. We don't know. I'll touch on this is the main point, but the other things, for example, they're talking about slimming costs where they can, shifting a number of World Service languages to be digital only, abandoning the long wave format for Radio 4, or the closure of the long wave platform itself, trying to reach 75% of BBC viewers through iPlayer each week as opposed to linear terrestrial TV, I guess. Lots of talk about, investment in things for the digital-led things like iPlayer, BBC Sounds and all that. But let's talk about CBBC. That's why we're all here, isn't it? This is something that means a lot to us, particularly people of my generation. When the CBBC launched as its own channel in 2002, I was 6 years old, so I was the prime age to get into BBC and a lot of the programs it offered at the time. So many classic programs came out of that era, and to be fair, even though I haven't been the target demographic of CBBC for at least 15 years now, I must admit some of the newer shows that have been coming out of it, they've been critically applauded. People have loved it. People I know now who have their own children say some of ththese CBBC shows are absolutely fantastic. So it's clear that the quality hasn't gone away over the past 2 decades. And children's TV, it's always been there. It was its own little strand on BBC 1 and 2 for decades before getting its own channel in 2002. So, what does this mean? I think it's personally quite sad. I know, you could have argued, though, we could have seen this coming. The BBC's been talking about going digital-led for a while. They've been having the government pressure them because of this recurring factor that more people are streaming television content, things like Netflix, Disney+, Amazon Prime Video, etc. They're doing that far more than watching TV, what they call linear. You might see that word pop up a lot in all this, linear. It's not being a linear channel. It's going to stop broadcasting in a linear sense. That just basically means the traditional way TV had been broadcasting, since the very beginning. Just turning on your TV and there it is. You don't need internet. You don't need anything like that. All you need is, legally, is a TV license, but that's a whole nother kettle of fish. So some people I've seen saying, this change in a way is positive or this needs to happen. I will admit, though, this is happening to CBBC and BBC4. This kind of makes the decision to bring BBC 3 back to linear TV a bit odd. For anyone who needs a refresher or is unfamiliar, BBC 3 went digital only or digital led in 2016, and there was a big push at the time. This is what we've got to do. This is the future. This is how we attract the 18 to 34 demographic that BBC 3 needs. And then sure enough, 6 years later, they're like, hey, we'll just bring it back as a linear channel. I know it surprised a lot of us, and there were people on both sides. Some people were like, yes, this is great, it's back. And some people were like, why? Like, especially in the 2020s as well, like, why is it back on linear TV? The decision, BBC Three, by the way, isn't mentioned anywhere in this. So, which doesn't surprise me because they've just brought it back. But, you know, you bring that back, yet you're making BBC 4 and CBBC, you know, your leading children's outlet for content, digital only. It seems... It's such a weird left field turn for me, especially coming at this time. But what do I think about this? Like, is this a good thing? Well, it depends how you look at it. I mean, of course, if you're talking about them wanting to save money and reinvest it in things, you could argue, yeah, sure, going digital led is probably the better way to go. You know, kids are very sophisticated now anyway. They know how to use the internet. They know how to navigate streaming services such as Netflix, Disney Plus. I'm sure they could figure out the iPlayer as well if they wanted their content there. So on that hand, you could argue it's a good thing. But there are also a lot of families out there who just don't have the luxury of streaming services. And I'm not just talking about the price, because of course iPlayer, someone like, oh well, iPlayer is free. Well, again, to use the iPlayer, you technically have to pay a license fee. I don't mean in terms of price. Some people can't afford either like top quality internet that can stream stuff efficiently, or some people just can't afford to have like internet at all. We're living in an age at the minute where the cost of living is rising astronomically. I mean, you've heard it all in the news about the gas prices going up. People are cutting costs. I'm not saying people are going to cut off their internet. I think they'd value that higher above a lot of things because, you know, we need the internet so much. But if push comes to shove, I think some people are going to have to take some tough decisions. And again, a lot of families don't have either full access to the internet or access to decent internet where they could stream stuff. So having CBBC as it exists now as a linear channel offers a lot of content to those kids who might not have access to Netflix and Disney Plus. You talk about accessibility and trying to reach everyone, but until we live in an age where everyone in the UK has like very high quality internet that can stream stuff no problem whilst other people are using the internet, stuff like that, until we have that, I'd argue, especially in CBBC's case, you could make arguments for the others, but for children's content, I'd argue it's more important than ever that it remains a linear channel, at least for the next few years, which it is, of course. But I'd argue even beyond that, just to give everyone the chance to catch CBBC. That's my main thing. It makes it more accessible. When we get to that day, when everyone has fast fiber internet, whatever it is, when we get there, cool, you can make everything digital led by all means. But I think for now, keeping CBBC completely as a linear channel in the future is probably the most accessible way to go. Although Tim Davies does say at the moment they are still delivering value to millions of viewers and listeners at low extra cost. So that just creates mixed messages for me, in my opinion. So they're acknowledging keeping it on the air as a linear channel in, say, the next 3 years because they are delivering so much value to all these viewers across the UK, so yet it's at a low extra cost. So I don't think they break it down individually, but by making CBBC non-linear, just how much money are you saving exactly? Because from the sounds of it, if it's low extra cost, then surely you can trim the fat elsewhere. You know, maybe cut of the star wages, slim them down a little bit. Like, they've done that before, but there's always the argument you could slim that a little bit more. Slim down wages, cut out some more of the bureaucracy, stuff like that. This is what I mean. I wish they clarified how much they were going to save with this, because if it's at low extra cost, then that to me just creates a massive mixed signal of, well, what's the point of even swapping it anyway if the cost isn't that great to maintain it as a linear channel? But of course, as they are focusing on the iPlayer, they want the iPlayer to be like their Netflix, their Disney Plus. An interesting thing here, actually, in the things that are going to change, is they say they're going to request Ofcom, which is like the TV regulatory board, if you like, to remove regulatory restrictions on iPlayer to expand box sets and archive content. Now, I do not know what these regulatory restrictions are. Some of you who are more savvy to it might be able to enlighten me in the comments. But this basically implies they're going to ask Ofcom to take off some restrictions, which means they could maybe add more box sets, perhaps new content, or like archive content as well. So like CBBC shows from their past, not just CBBC, of course, shows in general, like get all the back catalogue on there. They do it every now and then, but there's always the argument there could be more on the iPlayer. But then this makes me think, well, what about BritBox, which was their attempt at a streaming service? Now, that one, that's not license fee covered. You know, you pay for a BritBox subscription. I believe it's still £5.99 a month, which I think makes it one of the cheapest out of the big hitters out there. And that has a wealth of, like, you know, archive content. I believe they've tried a few originals as well. Not sure how well they've done. But yeah, the BritBox is basically the BBC and ITV's attempt at trying to do a Netflix and a Disney Plus, etc. I don't actually know how well BritBox has gone. I haven't seen any articles about like how well it's performed, or is it underperforming, all that sort of stuff. So I really can't comment on like whether I think it's doing well or if I think it's floundering. But this push, like asking Ofcom to remove it so they can expand their box sets and archive content, if you're going with that, that makes me think, well, hey, let's just focus on iPlayer. BritBox is there for those who maybe can afford it or want to do it, but if we can get that archive content on the iPlayer, which is a free service, obviously you have a license fee. Although that's tricky in itself, because, you know, on iPlayer, it just says, hey, you got a license fee, all you have to do is click yes. As far as I know, with the iPlayer, there's no official way for them to check. I don't even know how regularly they go around checking who's got a license fee, to be honest, like how many arrests they make for people who don't pay the license fee. You know, when I said there's maybe people who don't have great internet and they might rely on like terrestrial linear TV channels like CBBC, some of you might go, oh yeah, but they've still got to pay the license fee, which is like 150, 60 quid a year. Well, it depends, because some rented accommodations, a lot of people rent these days, of course, not all of them, but some rented accommodations do include a television license within the renting guidelines. I remember when I lived in Liverpool, one of the accommodations I lived at the time, part of my rent agreement was that I got a TV license within that, so I didn't have to pay the £159 or whatever it is a year. So that might appeal to a lot of people. You know, if they're in rented accommodation where a TV license is already covered, then that's basically free access to all the BBC channels, including CBBC for children, and the iPlayer content as well. So yeah, push the iPlayer, make that more digital led, get more stuff on there, old stuff, new stuff. I think that's great, as long as it's accessible. So, on the whole, am I sad that CBBC eventually is going to stop being its own linear channel? Yeah, I think it's a great shame. You know, I mean, I'm a bit biased. I grew up with it. I grew up with the CBBC channel, all those great programs catered specifically for, you know, children, and how well they were received by myself, my friends, and how well they continue to be received by the current generation as well. So, it is a shame. I'm not going to stand in the way of change, though. You know, change does come. And some people have, you know, quite rightly said this closure, if you like, in the linear sense, is still about 3 years away at least. So, you know, within that time, they could make a U-turn. They could decide, hey, you know what, we can trim the money elsewhere, save money elsewhere, we'll keep it as a linear channel. There's a lot of time left for decisions to change. I mean, just look at BBC Three. Yeah, they went digital only, but then, you know, 5-6 years later, hey, we're back as a linear TV channel. So anything can happen. And I mean, I just hope, for the reasons I mentioned, I hope it remains linear, mainly for the accessibility side of things, because yeah, people can navigate the internet. Kids are savvy, they can do it. I'm not saying they can't, but I just think, again, it's that accessibility, that reach to get a lot of the public, you know, who might not have great access to the internet or having to try and cut costs. If they've got a TV license covered in their rent or whatever their living situation is, that's great. They can use what's there on the linear channels. So by shutting more down, including BBC 4 too, it's just a great shame. My main thinking now is, if you want to scrap CBBC as its own linear channel, fine, go for it. But I think CBBC can exist on linear TV. Why not go back to what it was before? For anyone who wasn't around before 2002 or can't quite remember, children's TV or CBBC did exist, but it was shown on BBC One or BBC Two at certain times in the day. So why not just go back to that, say from 3 PM till 6 PM on, well, it's more likely going to be BBC Two these days, isn't it? You know, or BBC One, from 3 till 6 PM, show CBBC, show children's programs, give them at least 3 hours of content on linear TV, you know, because I'd say that's still a thing for a lot of kids. I used to do it. I'd come home from school straight on CBBC for at least an hour. I think that's a good option. Put it back as a strand on BBC One or BBC Two. Good compromise there. Also, it sort of defends what the BBC's universal remit is. It's a public service broadcaster. It's meant to serve all different kinds of people in the public. In fact, every different kind of person in the public. So by keeping some linear footprint, if you like, you are serving those who only have access to linear TV, but then by also putting it digital or having the digital focus, you are also catering to those who have access to those digital services at that high quality. So I think the Strand model, it's an old model, that's what it used to be, but I think in this day and age, keeping that, especially if the cost is low, the extra cost is low, you know, you getting rid of the dedicated channel, but surely, you know, 3 hours at least of 3 hours of content every single, even just the weekdays, you know, 5 days a week, that can't cost them too much in the grand scheme of things compared to what they're saying they need to save or things that are more expensive. So keep the Strand model, you're appealing to the linear viewers and also the digital viewers by putting CBBC content on the iPlayer. But, of course, as I say, this is going to take a few years to come to fruition. We don't know what it's going to look like in 2025 or beyond 2027 when the Royal Charter ends and the license fee well, God knows what happens there. But let me know your thoughts. Are you gutted that CBBC is no longer going to be a linear channel in the sort of near future, you know, the next 3 years, something like that? Let me know your thoughts on that below in the comments. Like this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to the channel if you're brand new, by the way. I know this is a bit odd for me doing these off-the-cuff, unscripted videos about topics, but if you enjoyed it and you want to see more on stuff I'm passionate about or stuff that's going on, do let me know. I'd be curious to do it, absolutely. I've been Adam Martyn from AMTV. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all next time.
We're just normal men.
What do you mean, normal men?
We're just innocent men.